Plutus Foundation Live. We have Kara Perez with us today. Kara, thank you for joining us with Plutus Foundation on across all of our social media today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So Kara, so our audience knows, Kara is the founder of Bravely Go. That's a feminist financial education company. Bravely focuses on being actionable, intersectional, and accessible financial education to people through pop-up events and online community. Additionally, Kara co-hosts the award-winning podcast, The Fairer Sense. We all know The Fairer Sense over at the Plutus Awards, so this is really exciting. And that's been named the top money podcast for women by Forbes and The Balance. Kara has been featured in the New York Times, Forbes, NPR. We're going to talk a little bit about that too. Glamour, ABC, Nightline News, and U.S. News and World Report as a financial expert. So that is all, exceedingly impressive, Kara. And I want to get to kind of how you did all of this and, a little piece of how success has come to you. And so let's start with Bravely Go. How did you come up with the idea and what brought on the intention to put together Bravely Go?
Yeah, such a great question that I think about all the time. And I'm also like, how did we get here? How did we get here? So for anyone who doesn't know, I graduated college in 2011, and I actually have a degree in English. My concentration was in critical race theory. So anyone who wants to get into that in the comments, I'm available. And after graduating, it was 2011. And so it wasn't technically the Great Recession, but everyone who lived through it knows that like 2011 very much so felt job-wise like 2008, 2009. And so I couldn't find a job. Still to this day, no one has ever looked at me and been like, hey, girl, like, I want to give you a 401k. I want to pay for your healthcare. Never have I been hired for a full-time job.
What kind of jobs were you looking for at the time?
Yeah, I was looking for like social media management, community management, anything like copywriting. I thought, English degree, here we go, we can translate into that. But I waited tables in actuality. So I worked at two different restaurants, and then I started catering, and that's how I paid my bills. And in I'm not quite sure of the timeline year-wise, but I know age-wise, when I was 26, I had what I lovingly refer to as my quarter-life crisis, and realized
we've all been there.
Right? Who hasn't been? It's like the most relatable thing. It's also the worst. It's so horrifying. I remember just being so anxious and so afraid that the life I was living, which was very low income, I wasn't saving. I definitely wasn't investing. I didn't even know how to invest. I had all this student loan debt. And I was watching, this was the wildest part of it. I was watching all my friends succeed, or they were like, I just got my first full-time job, or I got a promotion, or I'm traveling, or I'm like a creative, I'm a photographer or something like this. And I was like, I am catering maybe 12 hours a week. I am crying in my bedroom a lot. I'm eating like a lot of peanut butter because it's the only thing I can afford. And I am just not doing well with this whole adulting thing. And so I realized money was really the issue for me. I wasn't earning enough. And what I did earn, I didn't know how to put to use really. And so this is a very long-winded way of saying that Bravely was really born the day I broke down in a Target parking lot and was like, what am I doing with my life? Because I realized I needed to learn about money. And so I started looking for resources that reflected my experience back to me, and saw very few at the time. Like, I know you've been in the game a minute, Harlan, like you'll remember back in 2014, 2015, there were certainly a lot of personal finance bloggers, but the ones that I kept running into were very high earning couples pursuing FIRE. And I was not really seeing anyone who was me, who was like single, like financially single, literally single. I had just started dating someone, but we weren't serious yet. Tbone, still together. And very low income. Like I was making $18,000 a year, living with roommates in a major city and without any family financial support. Like, I guess, if I had like showed up at my mom's doorstep and been like, I am skint, she would have been like, you can live with me, but I can't pay your bills. Like, there's just no family money for me. So I was like, well, okay, I'm not seeing this. I guess I'll create this. So it started as a blog tracking my debt payoff journey. But once I realized like, yeah, I really want to talk about like social issues. I really want to talk about the intersection of my gender and money. I really want to talk about what it's like to be a woman in these rooms where it's all these like dudes. I want to talk about that. That's when Bravely really came to be.
Why do you think it is that there weren't a lot of people talking from that perspective, or people writing, I should say, or speaking about finances from that perspective that you could find online?
I think I will kind of like chalk it up to, I'm sure there were some people and I couldn't find them. I didn't really know how to use Google as well as I do now. And I think two, the world of money largely has been a very upper middle class, white, heteronormative place forever, right? Like forever. So people looking at that, I think might have been like, oh, this is clearly not for me. No one wants to hear from me. Or, just kind of like felt excluded. And then the people who did feel comfortable talking about it were so loud and so often shared. Like, how many times when I first started out was I referred to the mad scientist, Mr. Money Mustache, and budgets are sexy, which, like, no shade to all those people, but they are all straight white men. And those blogs were just shared constantly. Like, the mad scientist was inescapable, like truly inescapable. Everyone just referred you back to him. So I also think the ecosystem was just small enough that people were like, we can just keep doing this and this and this. And like, why change?
So what do you think Bravely Go has added to the conversation?
If I just may be so bold as to say, quite a bit. I really think that we've done a lot to pave the way for a lot of the diverse voices that are out in the world of personal finance blogging and like media companies now, which I'm really proud of. I would also say the Ferriss, my podcast with Tanya Hester, has also done a lot of kind of like ground laying. That's how I think of it. I also just think it's so empowering. It's so exciting. It's so liberating to see someone say something that you agree with, and just even a retweet or a like, or just to feel really validated. And I think, again, if I may be so bold, I really think that I have helped validate other people to say like, yes, my story is worth sharing. Yes, my experience is worth talking about.
And how did the Ferriss start? The Ferriss start.
That's wow. Yeah. Take me back. How did it start?
Yeah.
So
I love these little history, these walks through history. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah. It's kind of the behind the scenes. Tanya and I were in a mastermind group, and Tanya was about to achieve FI. She was like 6 months out from FI, and I was just beginning Bravely and was still very low income. And I just felt like I was like, I'm out of debt. This is so good. But the building wealth portion is, wow, this is a real long road I'm just beginning to walk. And Tanya was at the end of that road. So she actually reached out to me and said, I'd love to start a podcast about how we're at the different points in our journey. And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. I'd also like to talk about like more feminist stuff. And she got on board with that pretty quickly. And so it started off kind of based in our personal experiences and like that of our friends. And then in later seasons, we definitely got much more like socioeconomic, sociopolitical, which is where it's at now.
So when you started writing, this was like me, when I started my site, it was about me learning. This was about you learning about money. This was about you getting out of debt. This was about you taking the time to figure out what your financial situation was and could be, and how to move it forward. So now today you're a financial expert that is been featured on all of those places that we mentioned earlier. What is it about your path that brings you from the point of I'm figuring all of this out with you to the point where I'm on the news, I'm talking about money, I'm the expert here, thanks for listening to me, and here you go.
Yeah, kind of what was the tipping point? I think a couple of things. I think being really consistent. I used to write blog posts every week, and I like always got them scheduled, always got them up. And so I think that did a lot of good for my SEO results.
Mhm.
I think I have really strong SEO. I also think, yeah, having a particular point of view. Because when someone wants to Google financial independence, that's right, that's like a huge world and has been for a while. And there's a lot of stuff that's going to come up. But if someone wants to Google women financial independence, that's going to narrow it down a little bit more. Or if someone wants to Google like Black woman financial independence, that's going to narrow it down even more. So I really think for me, leaning into my identity of I'm a feminist and I'm talking about it. I'm low income and I'm talking about it. I have this kind of wild debt payoff story. I'm going to talk about it. Really helped stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, okay. And so your wild debt payoff story. I'd like to just kind of go through that so people get a little bit of perspective on kind of how amazing this whole journey has been for you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'll give you the like TLDR, which is so I graduated with $25,302 in student loans. So not really one of these wild amounts that we see stories about, but for not having a job, for living in one of the most expensive cities in the country. I live in Austin, Texas, and for not having any financial support, it was so hard to make find family financial support. I mean, obviously I have a lot of privilege, but my mom wasn't like, here's $500 a month, which no shade if your family does. That's great. Wish my mom could. So paying off, I didn't really pay off the debt for the first year out of school because I really couldn't. But then once I had my quarter life crisis, got into it, I became so good at budgeting. I lived off of about $10,000 a year for 2 years. So that's including rent, including car insurance. That's including groceries. I worked 5 different part-time jobs, 60 to 70 hours a week because they were all low paying. Looking back, something I would have done differently is looked for one single higher paying job more aggressively. I did continue to apply for jobs and just continued getting turned down. So I thought at the time, why waste energy on that? May as well put together this patchwork of jobs because that's more immediate. And that was very effective, but so much more stressful and harder than it needed to be, I think. And so I did that, and I would put absolutely every single penny I earned beyond the basic needs towards debt. I mean, really and truly, when I tell you that I was sewing up my $2 Forever 21 leggings, like because I didn't want to spend the $2 to buy new leggings, that is what I was doing. I was living off of my catering leftovers. Like I was just a scavenger of a person. And it allowed me to have months where I was paying off $1,500, $3,000 because I was living on such a tiny amount. So even though I didn't make very much overall, 90% of my income could go towards debt payoff.
And at the same time, how are you dealing with all of that stress?
Not always super well. I would definitely say it was one of the most mentally unwell time of my life. In the moment, it did give me some direction because before I found the world of personal finance, I felt very unmoored and very lost. And I felt like I was losing this race with my friends. But once I was in it, living on such little money is really hard. It's super duper hard. And even though I'm a very privileged person, and so other parts of my life were very easy, like no one's being racist towards me, and I had a good group of friends that were very understanding. So no one was shaming me for my decisions. But it still sucked when my friends were like, well, we're going out to dinner. And I'd be like, I can't, or I will never forget, all my housemates went on this trip I lived with 3 of my very good friends, and they all went to Vegas for a weekend. And it was only going to be like $400, $500 because the tickets there were like 99 bucks. The hotel room had been comped. I didn't have to pay for a hotel room. So it's just like food and travel there and back.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't want to do it because I wanted to spend the $400 on my debt. And I regret that. I should have gone to Vegas. You only have a 27-year-old butt once in your life. I should have gone to Vegas.
I hope Jen puts that up as a quote that I yeah. So you missed out on a few things. Would you do that differently now?
Yeah,
or was that kind of what you had to do?
It was what I think it was what I had to do, but I do think, well, let me rephrase that. I needed structure really badly. And being so strict with myself provided that structure. But looking back, I mean, the phrase that keeps running, I'm 32 now. The phrase that keeps running through my head is like, youth is wasted on the young. And I'm like, it's so true. You do not know how good your metabolism, your energy, your skin, everything is at 24 or at 27, whatever. And now, like, I get tired more easily. So
you have to stop right there because you are very young, very still. So that is.
I don't mean to say like, oh, I'm 32, like I'm ancient, but you do notice the changes in your body. You really do, and I can only imagine that's going to continue as I age. And so, I do wish I could go back to my 26, 27-year-old self and say like, hey, you can ease up a little bit. It's really going to be okay. You're going to pay off this debt. You're going to have more to invest. You're eventually not going to live with 3 roommates and like half the time all their partners. We would have nights where there were like 10 people in the house. And I was like, cool.
So was this before you started Bravely Go, that point in your life, or was it, happening at the same time?
The debt payoff was before I started Bravely Go. I paid off all my debt before I started Bravely. And then I spent like 8 months kind of marinating about, I knew I wanted to change directions with my personal finance writing. I just didn't, I was like, how do I exactly want to, what do I want to say? And then I got the LLC and the domain and went all in.
You got to get the LLC.
Gotta have it.
Yeah. So do you think in today's economy, hopefully post-COVID, maybe still in COVID, I don't really know where things are, but is some of what you went through with your debt payoff story, do you think that's possible today?
I think some of what I went through is possible today, and I think some of it is not possible today. The world has changed so much in the last year, and I think the way that people think about money has changed in the last couple of years. I think the conversation around wealth inequality is getting louder and louder and more nuanced, which I'm all for. I think the conversation around investing and who has access to that and who has access to what parts of investing is getting louder and louder. I also think, this idea of like grind. People are falling more in love with and more out of love with. I don't know if anyone here follows the NAP ministry on social media, but I highly recommend it. I think a lot of people are like, capitalism is a scam. Why am I going to spend my one life, just like grinding away? And then I also think a lot of people are like, push yourself, hustle, optimize everything, earn as much as you can. And I think there's value to both. When I was paying off my debt, I was very much so in the push yourself, because again, I needed structure. And that worked for me. But again, like I said, it wasn't the healthiest time of my life, physically or mentally, by any means. And so if anyone out there is watching this and is like, I've lost my job in the pandemic, I'm feeling stressed or I'm feeling depressed because how much of the world has changed and everything is hard, you absolutely do not have to adhere to anyone else's timeline, to anyone else's success story, just because someone else like fired by 30 or I paid off my debt. I paid off $18,000 in 10 months. Like, you don't have to do that. It's totally fine.
And, I think from I can speak for myself a little bit. A year into the pandemic, and I'm just tired. There's a lot I want to do, and there's a lot that I believe that I should be doing, and sometimes it's just I need to take a break, and I think that's okay.
Yes, I think it's more than okay. I think it's essential. Early on in the pandemic, I actually was very frustrated with a lot of the calls for grace and for taking a break, because I did think it was a very privileged thing to say, because not everyone can walk
Mhm.
away from work, and that's a position I've been in, and it was a position I was in earlier in the pandemic. But I also think, like, something I say to my partner all the time is not because Tbone, just to brag about Tbone for a second, is he's in grad school full time, and he works two part-time jobs, so he's always busy.
Mhm.
And I will often say to him, I'm like, don't like capitalism win, bro. Like, take a nap or like play. He
Mhm.
started playing Skyrim. I don't know if anyone here is a gamer. He started playing Skyrim, and I'm like, go play an hour of Skyrim. Do it. Like, give yourself that grace. So I think it's really important that we all do that in whatever way we can.
Okay. Yeah. And point of reference, in terms of where you are now, you earn more from what you do than Tbone, if I can call him by that name,
You absolutely
does.
can.
So what's that dynamic like?
Honestly, it's great. Uh, T-Bone is not a competitive person, and I am. So when he out earned me, it was always a goal of mine to beat him. He doesn't care at all. He's like, that's great. We also, I should say, we don't care, or we don't share finances. So we don't have any joint bank accounts or joint credit cards or anything. We do live together, and we do split groceries 50-50, but it's like, I'll put some on my credit card, he'll put some on his. At the end of the month, we'll Venmo each other. So I think that makes it maybe easier than people who do have commingled finances. But also in general, my personality and my like who I am lends itself to working more better than T-Bones does. So I think in our dynamic, this will continue to be the norm, and I don't foresee it being like a relationship issue really ever.
That's great. That's great. It's good for you both to be on the same page with that. And just going back now, the opportunities that you have, which have certainly contributed to your success. How did some of those gigs come about? And I'm talking about work, just being featured regularly on NPR. I think it's the 1A. Is that
Yes.
yeah. So how did that come about?
Google. They Googled me. I don't, or that they found me on Google. I don't know
Hmm.
what they Googled to get to me, but I asked when they called. I was like, "How did you find me?" And she said, "Google." um, and yeah, so I think good SEO once again, kind of coming through. And then I also think being a really prompt responder. I haven't been so good at it the last couple of months, but early
Mm.
on in my career, you emailed me, I emailed you back 37 seconds later. Like, I was on it. And so that got me a lot of opportunities.
Okay. And how do you keep it going? Like, it's one thing to get that initial invitation,
Mhm.
but what do you think it is that has them coming back to you, regular contributions, that sort of thing?
Yeah. Being really honest, I think you have to be the person who's not afraid to say, like, go beyond the party line, basically. Like,
Mhm.
the first time I was on NPR, I like quoted Kanye, and who, like, problematic fave, of course. And I was like, millennials get a really bad reputation, but no one's talking about how the boomers wrecked the economy or something like that. Like, I was just like, well, here's what's up. And we live in the world of clicks. We live and die by algorithms. We live and die by page views. And, like, as we all know, right? Not that I think I'm outrageous, but people who are willing to say stuff beyond, like, you should save 10% of your income, are
Mhm.
going to get more opportunities because people are sick of hearing that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Just I think having a personality is really the first step here for anyone
Yeah.
who wants to have, who wants to be successful through their writing or their speaking. It's being authentic and just being a good person to talk to, in that the conversation is flowing, like, I hopefully this is, and that there's so much within there, and you've got concise way of speaking, multiple layers, and a little bit of fun, and I think all of that helps. Yeah, so aside from that, I want to get back to the SEO point, because you mentioned that a few times. You mentioned how people have found you on Google. Back when my site that I started was popular on Google for certain terms that I think came about just because I was writing about sort of the same thing constantly. So what do you think are some of the keys that have helped you be successful with SEO? And did you go into this thinking about, what am I going to do to improve my SEO, or was it more of a natural thing for you?
No, I still wouldn't say I'm much of an SEO expert. I want to be really clear about that. For anyone looking for like the hot SEO tips, I'm not sure I'm actually the person you want, but I can give you my what I've done. I think, again, consistency, right? We've been in the game long enough to really watch the blogging world go from really long form blog posts every day to then the shorter ones. There was definitely a period of like 2 years where it was like 500 words max, like people don't want to read. And now we're really in this kind of like overwhelming / golden age of multiple platforms that can all be their own micro blogs. Instagram, TikTok, you can just have one of those. You don't even need a blog necessarily
Mm-hmm.
to build a business if you have a really thriving one specific channel. But what I would say, what I think has helped me, and again, these are just my thoughts, is having a couple different channels, and being active on them. And I limit myself, like, I am on Instagram, I am on Twitter, and I am on my own website. I just branched into Pinterest this year. Like, it's okay, you don't have to do everything, but I've got a really good backlog on all of those things. And again, when you go to my website, you're going to see blog posts like a working definition of financial feminism, not just like how to save money at the grocery store. Because that blog post has literally been written a
Mm.
million times. Like, no one needs to hear me say, I use coupons and shop the edge. Like, no. Instead, I can say, like, here's what financial feminism means to me, and be one of the first to do that. And so that's going to push me up, I think, as well in the SEO world.
How do you think you can, for someone who maybe is just kind of trying to get started with this, how do you find those things that are the first? Because I think a lot of people get ideas from reading, and so there's a lot of kind of an echo chamber, very similar content out there, whether it's blogs or YouTube videos. How do you make that lightning strike happen, and have this brilliant idea for something that no one has written about, to with a perspective or to the extent that you've written about?
Yeah, I think release the idea of perfection and release the idea that you're going to be the first. Like, something I tell myself, there's a quote from the art world, which is like, every artist steals, right? There are no new ideas. There really aren't any new ideas. Like, financial feminism is built off of the feminist movement, which has already had 3 waves, right? Like, nothing that I'm talking about is brand new. I'm just applying it in a new context of money. Not even totally new. Like, second wave feminism was all about money. So I think, rather than, a lot of people tell you like keyword research, which I do think is very important. But I also think, if you're spending an hour a day like reading other people's stuff and just trying to think, how can I repackage this in my own voice, you've already missed the mark. Instead, talk about what you want to talk about. That's all I did with my first blog when I was paying off debt. I remember writing this blog post called Smarter Dumb, which, like, that's not going to rank super well in SEO at all. But it was about I can't quite remember. Oh, I was so close to paying off my debt. I had $2,000 left in debt, and I had $2,000 in my emergency fund. And I was like, smart or dumb, do I take the money out of my emergency fund to pay off my debt? And it just was like flooded with comments because people got opinions, right?
Hmm.
And so that did super well. So, and Smart or Dumb is a game that I have played since college with one of my best friends. We'll be like, smart or dumb, get another drink. It's already 1 a.m., but I just applied it again to the financial context. So don't try and, don't look at what someone else is doing and just think, I'm going to take this and just like rewrite it in my own voice. Instead, think about what you're experiencing, what you're going through, what is your truth, and share that. Like, that's really where authenticity happens.
So what if your truth is something that you feel that maybe other people's truths, and you've something that, like a Facebook audience member has said, something that's been covered a million times. Yes, it's been covered a million times. It's still important to me. I have a perspective. It may be similar to other people's perspective, but how can I be authentic and interesting when I'm writing or speaking about that?
I think that's going to come down to like the devil's in the details there. If you do want to write another grocery store blog post, maybe you're doing it in language that isn't really commonly used. Maybe you're using GIFs. Maybe you are writing it as if you're like Quentin Tarantino, that's how you're going to be able to break into the content area that's the same, but you're bringing that unique voice.
Yeah, it sounds like you have to exercise some creative muscles in order to really be successful, especially on some of these topics that might be very familiar to people, especially if your audience is kind of the general audience that might be reading multiple different sources and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Any other ideas for just getting noticed by the people who can make a big difference in your exposure, whether it's NPR, the New York Times, ABC?
Yeah, I think be good to work with. No one wants to work with someone who's rude or snappy or holier than thou. Like, that's my ultimate no-no. Anytime someone gets holier than thou with me, I'm like, all right, you're dead to me. But because fundamentally, right, like, we're all people. Like, treat me like a person. You're not Beyonce. Calm down. So I think truly people overlook that, but being good to work with, I think, goes a really long way. And I do think, like, I don't always necessarily think let me just be honest. I think this last year in the pandemic, I got slightly harder to work with because I was way less responsive to things because I was like, I can't look at my inbox anymore. I'm stressed out. And it would take me like 2 weeks instead of 2 seconds to respond. So I also think, consider the context, but be good to work with as much as you can be.
Okay. And what are some of the things that that you feel that someone who's good to work with, what are some of those attributes? Who would you like to work with?
Oh my gosh, I would like to work with so many people. Instead of answering like who would I like to work with, I think, let me define, so I'm just readjusting here, what I think, what are some of the
qualities?
The qualities, thank you, that are good to work with. So I would say, being polite, being prompt to whatever degree. I would say like within 48 hours, try and get a response out to someone. I consider that prompt, especially given 2020. I think set expectations. Like, somebody reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and asked me for a bunch of stuff for a free event. And I was like, no, I can't do all this. This is way too much work. I was like, but I can do this. How does that work for you? And they were thrilled about it. And it ended up being a great event. So don't be like, nah, what the hell? But just be like, hey, you said this. I'm actually thinking this. How does that sound instead? And then I think kind of the final thing really is to respect someone else's, how they work. Like, a bunch of people will DM me on Instagram being like, I want to do something together, or can you like help me with something? And I'm like, can you email me about this? Because I do DMs, but it's an awful way to communicate with someone. It's so hard to find. I'm like, email me. And if you can't email me, I'm not going to come back to my DM and find you to hold your hand. Like, I've given you a clear task of how you can get in touch with me. If you can't follow that direction, that's a big red flag.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, especially when it comes to email. So many people want to work now, whether it's, I'm not really on Instagram, but Twitter DMs, Facebook messages. I ask everyone, please just email me. And, I guess from there, that's how, things get filtered through. And if they don't make that filter, then maybe we all miss out, but that's okay too. You don't have to take every single opportunity that comes your way.
Yeah, you can't, right? We only have so many hours and so much energy. Like, at some point I have to meal prep and take a shower,
So what is, you've had a lot of success, as we've talked about, with exposure through all these different channels. What is one thing that you haven't accomplished yet that is on your wish list or bucket list for a show you'd like to be on, or just or something that you'd like to achieve that is maybe just a little beyond what you've done so far?
I mean, I'd love to meet Oprah. But that feels kind of like the creme de la creme. So between where I am now and Oprah, I would love, I've been on local news a bunch, so I've been on TV a bunch, but I'd love to be on maybe a longer segment on a national TV show. I would love to speak at a college, to give I've done some like classroom presentations, but to do something to a larger amount of people on a college campus. I mean, I'd love to give a commencement speech. That's honestly, now that I've said that out loud, I'm like, that's my new goal. I want to give a commencement speech.
Good. I'm glad we've got that out there into the universe now.
Yeah.
Yes. So speaking engagements, how has that contributed to your success, whether it's physical, what you see, or how you feel about your success as a feminist financial expert?
That's a good question. I think speaking engagements can be really powerful, but they're also much harder to track the influence that they have on the rest of your career. It's not like you can check the open rate on the speech. But I do think I'm a good speaker. I think I'm a very funny, engaging speaker. I think that goes a long way with people. And so I definitely know I've given presentations, and then I've immediately seen my social media following go up by a couple hundred people because they want to stay in touch with me. They want to see me and hear me again, even if it is just on Instagram stories or Facebook Live or something. So I do think, I know we're still in the pandemic, but I do think speaking events can be really fun and really good for your brand.
And considering all the channels that you're in, and every time you mention this, I just think about how overwhelming it social media already is for me. Do you have help with some of these things? Is it just a one-woman show? What's the situation with kind of your empire?
Oh my God, I can't wait to tell Tbone that you use that word. He's gonna say, like, you spend so much time on the couch. What are you talking about? Yeah, so this past year, so this January, so I started the business officially in 2017. I went full time with the business right at the beginning of 2019. It was like January 1st, full time. And this January, I hired a part-time digital events assistant who helps me like 5 to 7 hours a week, but everything else is me, which is why sometimes not quite as consistent as some other people. Yeah, I would say I would love to hire more people. That would be the dream for sure.
What kind of digital events? What does that mean, and what do they do?
Yeah, we have hosted webinars for a few years now. Obviously, did a lot more last year, and they're so fun. I love them. And so we do a lot of free workshops. We also do ticketed workshops. We do a summit that is coming up in June. That's over 2 days, and we cover, just like we do with our blog posts or with our social media. I'll bring in speakers that have a specific area of expertise that I can't speak to, or that want to discuss the intersection of money and policy, or the intersection of money and our social lives, and how we're living. So that's really where we focus with our events.
Okay. And okay, so there's a question here, and I'm gonna refocus this question just a little bit. So I think the key, we come back to this a lot, is having your own unique voice in order to kind of be successful as a financial expert. People struggle to find their voice, whether it's photographers, writers, musicians. Finding that unique voice is something that takes a lot of work. Besides just being authentic, what else can do to discover within themselves what their voice is and what rings true to them, and something that they can express?
I think something that actually worked really well for me, that was not planned at all, is that I kept a journal for years. I haven't done it really recently, but years of my life I kept a journal. So I literally developed my writing voice in the journal. I think I was also an English major. I wrote a lot of essays. I wrote for the school newspaper. I took a lot of unpaid writing jobs after college. And all of that helped me realize what I like and what I don't like. But if you're not a writer, or if you haven't been secretly journaling for 17 years, don't think that that's the only way to do it. But think about, again, go back to your experience in your life and what you like and what you're passionate about, what excites you. Start there, and then just simply talk about it. Talk about it with people who will listen, but also talk about it to yourself. I talk literally out loud to myself all the time. All the time. I know people say that's like a sign of a crazy person, but like, I genuinely think it's made me a better public speaker. And I think it's made me a better debater, because I do love debating. And I also think it's made me run into my own passions and my own biases and my own like tunnel vision, where I'm like, why do I think that? I've been chatting to myself outside. Why do I keep saying this phrase? Why am I keeping? And then I'll just think about that. And I think that has helped develop my voice in the larger sense.
I'm really fascinated by that. Talking to yourself. What, like, is that for you? Is that kind of rehearsing a talk that you would give? Is it reading something that you're writing out loud? What is talking to yourself, and what does that sound like?
See, those two things you just said are very reasonable things, where it's, oh, I've written this speech, now I'm practicing it, or I want to read back this blog post I've written. No. That's not what I do. I will see something on the internet that will make me mad or make me really happy, and I will just talk about why it's making me feel those way. The mad thing I find to be the most helpful, because I'll talk through why I think this person's wrong, why they never should have put that out on Twitter in the first place, why I'm right. And I'll do it for like 20 minutes. I feel like this is kind of going off the rails. People were like, she's so professional. She's had such a, and now I'm like, talk to yourself. It's the secret ingredient. I genuinely think there's so much power in noticing your response to the world around you, because isn't that life? Right? Isn't that the whole thing about being a human? Is, oh, I like this person, I would like to see them again. I like this person, I would like to kiss them. I don't like this person, I think I'm going to put up a boundary. This job is cool, etc., etc. And it's the same with developing your voice. I like this. It's something I want to unpack. It's something I want to explore more. I don't like this, or I'm not interested in this. I think I will move away from that.
And Jen's asking if you argue with yourself, or are you sure of your position, and when you talk to yourself you are adamant, or do you argue both sides?
I rarely argue both sides. I'm trying to argue both sides more. So I would say I'm trying to build my ability to argue with myself, because I do think that I have created somewhat of an echo chamber, which I feel strongly that there are certain points of view I do not need to entertain. Like Nazis, no, thank you. No one needs to hear from you. It's done. But there are other things that I'm like, oh, I have not been entertaining this point of view. And frankly, it would probably benefit me to do that, at the very least, to just strengthen my argument against it. So I'm trying to do more of that now.
What do you see in, kind of the results of your, whether it's blog posts or talks? What gets you the best traction with your audience? Is it when you are very sure of your approach and opinions and thoughts on a certain topic, or is it when you kind of consider different perspectives and kind of play the, like, let's see if there's a balance here and what might be good on either side?
I think people like when I come down hard on something the most. I would say that gets the most like shares and views and likes. But I think that I have gotten the most thoughtful responses / the most long-term respect when I do put up the other side and say, here's what's valid about this. I did a big story on Instagram stories a few months ago, what is time, on student loan, or no, not on student loan, on the minimum wage, raising the minimum wage, which I personally am strongly in favor of. And so probably 80% of the story was about it was about the history of the minimum wage, how we got here, why it hasn't changed since 2009. And then I had several slides about why people don't want to raise the minimum wage. And the truth of the matter is the data tells us that, yeah, some jobs will be eliminated if we raise the minimum wage. And I was like, we have to accept this reality. Like I can't come here as an advocate of raising the minimum wage without talking about the people who will be negatively impacted about this. And I got a really good response to that. So some of both.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. So is there anything else that you might be able to impart on the audience in terms of just getting to the point where, hey, I'm a writer, whether I'm starting out or whether I've been doing this for 10 years, I've been putting financial content out there into the world, but I want to take this to the next level. I want to be respected by people who can amplify my voice to an enormous amount, just like NPR and the New York Times. What can they do to get to that point?
That's a really interesting question you've asked me here, because I think the word respect is just kind of sticking in my head, because I do think there's kind of an establishment idea of like respectability that I don't love. But I think if you want someone to respect your work, no matter what work you're doing, your work has to be, I'm going to use the word good, and I don't mean it necessarily has to be perfectly polished. I mean, I make a ton of spelling mistakes. It's kind of like my gig on Instagram now. I'm like, each slide I put up, there's going to be a typo, and I just don't care. I really don't. I don't think that negatively impacts my brand. I think what I'm saying is more important. But I think the quality has to be, I've done my research. I understand the topic I'm speaking about. I am respecting the people I am speaking with. I do think like shock jocks, to just in like a larger frame, they get a lot of attention, but do people respect those people? Like, no, I don't. I think a lot of people don't. Mm-hmm. So I think if you're looking for respect, or if you're looking for acknowledgement from larger organizations, focus on the quality of what you're doing, whatever it is you're doing.
Okay. And anything else that we didn't cover that you might want to mention before we kind of wrap this up?
No, I feel like we've been on quite the journey. I feel like I know myself better now.
Good. That was the secret goal of today. No, just kidding. Yeah. So where can our audience find you today?
Yes. So I am on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at We Bravely Go, and then on Twitter at Bravely Go, no we there. And then my website is bravelygo.co. It rhymes. Don't go to bravelygo.com. I don't know what you're going to find there. It could be anything. Okay. So I'm not responsible for that website. Yeah. And if you want to work with me, or if you want to, do some sort of fun, cool thing, email me. Don't DM me.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kara, for joining us today. I think this was really interesting to a lot of people. And I do know that we have some more comments here about financial feminism specifically. So we will have to get to that at another time, and maybe we can figure out a way that we can talk to you some more about that at some point. So thank you to everyone who's watching in. Thank you for your questions. And stay tuned. We'll be back next month for another Plutus Foundation Live.
Yeah, thank you for having me.